Here we are again on the Stages of the Soul podcast, a production of the Caritas Center. I'm Brian Dolan, and with me is Nancy Kane.
Good to be with you again. You're wearing
Here we are.
same shirt.
We are wearing the same shirts. We're talking over each other, wearing the same shirt. Last time, because we're doing video now, last time I ran upstairs and changed my shirt. I'm just far too lazy this time.
Yeah.
So if you notice we're wearing the same outfit as the most recent episode, there's a reason. We recorded the same day.
Yes, the very same day, because we are tight for time and just fitting it in.
There it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for those curious, behind me, this is not real brick. And if you're listening, you're just going to have to take my word for it, or just go check out our video. But it's wallpaper, very cheap wallpaper that looks like brick. Does it look real to you?
Looks very real. Looks like your hand should be bumping up against the brick.
Kind of like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's just a wall with wallpaper on it. There you go. Pretty fancy.
And that's a real bookcase behind me. That's not wallpaper.
And there are actual books you've read or that you'd like to read?
Most of them are books that I've read or I've scanned because it isn't worth really reading or it's reference. I love books. So that's one bookcase. We have another one in the living room and another one in Ray's in the guest room. So, I've had to kind of cut down a little bit. Can't take the house over with books.
No, you can't. Those are not fun to move whenever that might be the case. I have lots of shelves of books that I really intend to read. I think it would be great if I did. It's most of my bookshelves. I like articles more than I like books.
Oh, really? Like articles from online?
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's just I have the attention span of a gnat or something, but I get bored with books. And I think a lot of times, a lot of the books I've ended up picking up, it's like the author, they had a really good, like 3 chapters, but the publisher made them make 10. Yeah. And so you're just kind of like, okay, I got it. I know what you're doing here.
Yeah.
So your book is nothing like that.
Oh, right. Right.
Your books are nothing like that. But nonetheless. Okay. So today's topic for us,
yes,
we're going to talk today, build on something we discussed in our last episode, which is something we call examination of conscience. And I've heard you also refer to this in the spiritual formation program with Caritas Center as a daily examen. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you give us kind of a framework of what this is.
So I don't know if it started before St. Ignatius, but he was the one who formalized it as part of spiritual practices. And it's basically, we talked about this last episode, but it's a review of the day with Christ. And the beauty of this spiritual practice is it'll lead you to a greater awareness of God being in all the details and his presence with you. So you mentioned unceasing prayer. I think daily examen can lead you to more of a sense of unceasing prayer. And that's that awareness of Christ's presence with you.
And that's what that is. It's not a continued, like, I think to myself, how could I go a full hour nonstop, let alone all day? And that's not what Paul meant when he talked about that, right? No,
it's being able to keep lending your heart and your mind up to Christ in the midst of your daily activities. And so it's increasing your awareness that God's with you. Obviously, he doesn't want every thought that you've ever had to be a prayer thought. But there is an increasing, I found my own life, there's an increasing capacity to be able to easily recognize Christ's presence with you or go into prayer when you're in distress or when you're praising him because you're mindful that he's with you all the time.
And you've told me that this idea of at the end of the day, whether or not you're laying in bed or you just sit in a chair or wherever you are, spend time reflecting on your day. This can help that idea of being aware during the day of God's presence. How does it work that way? Because it would seem that it helps you at the end of the day reflect back, but how would it help you the next day be more aware?
That's a good question, because your circuits are now open to how you were surprised by his presence before. And I think we want new pathways in our brain being developed where there's an awareness of how he moves and that he's moving and that he's active and that you're not on your own and that you're not doing this alone. And so the examination of conscience is a time where he reveals that to you of like I said last one, like a meeting or a phone call, or you pick up a book, or you're driving in traffic, or that he's always speaking. We're the ones that just don't want to listen at times.
Yeah, I keep thinking of a situation years ago that's kind of connected to this. I was on before I lived in Chicago. My wife and I went with another couple on a little weekend trip to Chicago, and we ended up going to this Chinese restaurant and ordered far too much food for the four of us. And we were like, "Well, what do we don't want them to throw it out. We don't have a refrigerator, so we just thought, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to put it in a to-go box." And they had just a generic bag. There's no markings on this plastic bag. And let's just pray the Lord would guide us what to do with this.
Hmm.
Somebody needs it. We don't know who. And it's kind of rude to walk up to someone, "Hey, you hungry? You want this?"
You look hungry.
So yeah. So we got on the L and we went back to the Magnificent Mile and we're just walking. And again, I can't stress enough. This is not a transparent bag that someone would know what's in it. It's just a like plastic bag, no markings on it from a restaurant. And I was holding it. Somebody walked right up to me and said, "Are you going to finish that? Are you going to eat that?" And I
No
was like,
way.
"No, you want it? That'd be great. Thank you." And I handed it to him and we were like, "Look at God. He's right here. He's right here with us the entire time."
Isn't
It,
that cool?
but I think part of it was just that awareness of it. There was a miraculous thing to it, I believe. But also just that awareness of God's presence and just being, "God, be with us. Show us what we're going to do with this." We're thinking about it and it happened.
Hmm. The glory of God being revealed. And I think that he delights when we recognize his presence in all things.
Hmm.
It does not have to be burdensome at all. This is not again, back to I talked about the last episode. It doesn't have to be this, oh, I should. It's open our eyes to see eternal realities, eternal moments going on in right in front of me. Um, Speaking of that, Ray and I had breakfast at this little diner that we go to, and there's a waitress there named Peggy, and she's just like the life of the party kind of personality, kind of loud, and she laughs hard, um, and at some point when we were sitting there and watching her, I thought, man, she's just delightful. And so when she came close to our table, I said, Peggy, you're delightful. And she looked at me like, what? And she goes, delightful? Delightful? I said, yeah, you're delightful. And she looked around the restaurant. She goes, hey, everybody, they think I'm delightful. Because Ray said something at that point, too. And then she went to her next table and she goes, by the way, I'm delightful. I'm delightful. These people told me that I was delightful. Ray's me out and paying for the bill. And she's still going to other people at table saying, guess what? I'm delightful. I mean, it's like we had given her this huge gift. And I thought, this is an eternal moment. This is
Yes.
an eternal moment. That
Eternal yet so simple. It didn't take an extraordinary effort on your part, but it clearly transformed her countenance and her day.
Exactly, because initially she was like, you don't know who you're talking to. I'm not delightful. And then she repeated it to herself, and then she just kept repeating it. And it was like we gave her this bouquet of roses. I mean, it was so beautiful to see.
And clearly it hadn't happened to her before.
No, no. And that's the part that is the eternal moment.
Mm-hmm. And this is also to me part of what it means to be a witness for your faith. People turn it often into this like thing you have to do where you pull someone aside and give them the four spiritual laws and make them commit to Christ right now. No, sometimes it truly is being a light in a restaurant
Hmm.
and being loving and gracious to someone who's being kind.
Exactly. And I think of that statement from Paul in Philippians, whatever is good, whatever is true, whatever is beautiful, think on these things. And I think that we're called to bring out and point out the good, the true, and the beautiful in the world. And I think that can be, in a sense, the first evangelism, the first prelude to the gospel of we see some things that you're not seeing. Why? Because we have a God who made the whole world and is showing us the beauty of and grandeur of the world that he's created us in people and in the circumstances around us.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. So now, as we get into the daily examen or the examination of conscience,
Hmm.
we reference this is often something that's done at the end of the day.
Hmm.
And you've got some steps for us to guide through as you put on your reading glasses. How
Yes,
sophisticated.
we're,
Look
we're
at
going to
you.
make this formal. Um, I think first one, I made the mistake when I learned this years ago, is to think that I could do the examination of conscience when I'm in bed, I'm on my pillow, I'm all cozy, and I'm going
Oh,
to do it. And with inevitably, and then within 5 minutes, there was no more examination. There was
it's
snoring.
just sleep.
It was just deep sleep. So to do it before you actually climb into bed, so I find sitting in a chair or a quiet place. Some people light a candle as kind of like, again, that sacred space of God's here, but recognizing God's presence is super important because you don't want to go into this with your own internal monologue of, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Oh, that's right. I screwed up here, because God is always gracious. He's always kind. And even in his conviction, it's always something that pulls us up and out of ourselves and closer to him. And so we start with recognizing his presence and
So,
then ask,
but practically, what is that? Is this just like breathing deeply and just like the Lord is with me? Like,
yes.
what do you, how do you do that?
I don't even know if I breathe deeply. I think it's as simple as, Lord, I want to review the day, but I can't do this unless you show me, and let's do this together.
I see.
I mean, breathing would also enhance it.
See, I just have if my mind has been moving in a direction, I have to do something to stop.
Yeah,
And for me, sometimes it might just be, okay, here we go. I need to do this, and Lord, I'm not going to do this alone. We're
that's
in this together, and I want to. Yeah, okay.
That's beautiful. You've just upgraded
Oh,
this to another
thank you.
level.
Well, I do what I can.
But I think that's a really valid point because most of us have such busy monkey brains that to stop is difficult. It's difficult to stop because our brains want to keep solving that last conversation or the four things that we forgot to do or whatever. And breathing is also a mechanism where it sends a message to your brain and your body. We're going to go into another gear.
Right, because I also don't want to plow into a daily examine. I don't want to plow into. All right, okay. So I got up and I had breakfast, and I was rude to my wife, and I did that. Okay, sorry. And then I went. You don't want to. This is not the tone I think you're trying to create here.
Right, right. And it's beautiful, and to allow God to do this with us, he unfolds things gently. So as you're going through this, you're looking through, I do it in sequences. So it might, depending on what I'm feeling led to, it might be as simple as what stood out to me when I first got up in the morning. Maybe I was in a crabby mood or I was complaining or whatever. And then the Zoom meeting at 9 o'clock, and then the stopping for lunch. And so I'm going through it in a sequence of events, and each time pausing. What's the temperature of it, so to speak? Was I solving for myself? Like, say I woke up and I was crabby and irritable. What's the Lord showing me? He might be saying, if you pause a little bit more before you get up and give thanks and ask me to show you where I'm pouring out my grace, that would solve the crabby, uncomfortable feelings that you had. So it's a
I
very
see.
gentle flow.
And so and it's not I'm examining just my actions. I'm
Mhm.
examining my state of mind,
I'm examining my heart.
my heart. There we go.
And I think that's why I think when I said at our last episode that two things are mental prayer and the examination of conscience, this gets to me recognizing my need for grace and mercy, because I think it's easy in the spiritual life to do things and then forget that there's not any transformation going on,
Hmm.
and that the examination of conscience opens up the door for the Lord to convict us of our pride, our sin, our arrogance, our selfishness, but always in this loving companionship of he knows us better than we know ourselves. And I've seen for myself, and I've seen it for people that I've worked with throughout the years, is I don't want to find out about myself. I want to just believe that I'm really okay, and um, God's pleased with my performance, and I'll just keep pushing on. But in that whole notion, there's no need for redemption. I don't need a savior. I have a life coach.
To just keep telling me how great I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and who just wants to keep encouraging me and showing me how he's taking care of me. That's that's the early stages of faith. God wants us to go on to maturity where we recognize on deeper and deeper levels that I need to be safe for myself.
That's beautiful. Now, so we're examining our heart.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine we do need to examine our actions as well and our
Mm-hmm.
words.
Mm-hmm. Because again, that's going to get to what's really driving us. So maybe you're in a meeting, and now when you're going back over the reviewing of the day, you realize that you were dominating the meeting by wanting to have the last word on every opinion. And the Lord's saying that was about your pride, that was about your need for control. And that needs to, you need to let go of that. And perhaps even the Lord takes the next step and says, the next meeting, put in the discipline of silence for a while and just don't speak until you're spoken to and see how you feel.
Did my colleagues call you? Is that why you're bringing this up? Is that the no?
I don't want to talk about it. I don't. It's a little awkward. So if it
I've
works,
I've been accused of prolonging meetings, so maybe this is a conviction for me.
because you have opinions, or
uh, Meetings are kind of like torture for me in some respects, and so I feel like one of my jobs is to make them more fun. And my wife has told me before, as I describe it, she goes, "Boy, I'm glad we don't work together. You would drive me crazy." I'm working on it, Nancy. I'm working on it.
we're all a work in progress.
That's right. Yeah. Do you have any more to share about like how we review the day, or is that covering kind of how you review the day?
I think that covers it. Yeah.
Okay, so the next thing you have is reconciliation. What do you mean by that?
So this might be more formal than what would actually occur, but it's that moment where the Lord shows you you've been talking too much in the meeting, and you pause and you ask for forgiveness. You ask for a deep sense that he is merciful and he does forgive you. So there's this reconciliation. You're reconciling yourself to Lord, or maybe he says that in that meeting you were dominating the conversation, and I'm showing you that Sue Smith over there was feeling insecure because she didn't feel like she had anything to say.
Hmm.
And your domination was now affecting her. Next time, go to her and apologize and ask her if she can share more of her opinions. So
Whoa, you just cranked it up there. Go to her and apologize. Wow, I can't just change my behavior.
no, it's that you got to swallow humble pie and be like gulp. Yeah, got to eat a big dose of humble pie.
Well, and boy, you really are convicting me in this too, because I remember working through in the spiritual formation program the spiritual practice of silence, and it was amazing to discover how often pride guides one to try to dominate conversation and those kind of things. Like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I must be the one to say it because then it'll be said correctly. Those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I discovered one colleague in particular that was strikingly better at sharing information concisely. I think I
Mm-hmm.
can tell a good story. Sometimes you don't need a story. Sometimes you just need zip, concise information.
Mm-hmm.
And it taught me to kind of actually defer to this person. They're better than you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just highly advocating this meeting examination. You're saying this people are doing their examen.
Well, and I have found for myself when I practice that discipline of silence, like in a meeting, I'm amazed at how well it goes without me.
That's true.
Like, oh gosh, I've hardly said anything, and problems got solved, and it was productive, and they didn't necessarily need me. Oh, what a surprise! I'm not the center of the universe.
Yeah, it's a good exercise, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is.
Wow.
It's
Somebody
humbling.
needed to hear this besides me. I can guarantee it.
Oh, I think I'm speaking to myself as well. So I think that this I'm grateful, having practiced this for so many years. I'm so grateful when the Lord shows me things about myself because it says that He loves me so much that He doesn't want to leave me in my place of dysfunction and sin.
Hmm.
And so when He shows me things now, it's like, okay. all right, we can keep moving forward. And then sometimes it's a hard pill to swallow when it means that I'm going to have to go to someone and say, you know what, I just was aware that I was rude, or I was caught up in my own righteousness, and I'm so sorry. That
I
affected
was
you.
too witty too often in the last meeting. That's
Right.
not quite what you mean, though, I don't think. I
Yeah.
like that though, because that takes it to that next level of, yeah, I mean, that's how you practice humility, is you don't just tell God, you go to the person that you stepped on.
Yeah, and I think that I know in my own life, say when I've had to go to Ray and apologize. There's this moment beforehand of like, oh, 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 this is going to be painful. But then I think, what's more painful, swallowing my pride and apologizing, or the pain I inflicted on Ray because of my rudeness or my arrogance or my insensitivity? And so when I put it in that regard, it's like, no, your pride is not. It needs to go. It needs to go.
And see, I love that story because, again, as we're discussing this, it truly shows that value of examining your day, because it
Hmm.
can give you even tasks almost to do the next day as you
Hmm.
begin to conform your life to Christ more deeply.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that's good, Nancy.
And I also think that this is an antidote towards, if you're coming before the Lord with honesty, it's really an antidote to becoming a Pharisee.
Mm.
Because I think if I'm not doing the examen, I know for myself, I will think I'm better than I am. And the Lord is always showing me who I am rightly when I give him the chance. And he's always taking us deeper and deeper. And so I think the longer that we walk with Christ, the deeper the conviction is, because he goes then not just to superficial comments, he goes to the real issues of the heart that he wants to auger out of our soul.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Although auguring the soul doesn't sound too enticing, but I know what you mean. So,
Right.
and
It's,
and then you take us to resolution. So is that just amen, or are we doing more than that?
well, I think it's a resolution of, now what I've learned or what I've known, what am I going to do differently?
Hmm.
And what is God inviting me to? Is he inviting me to trust him more? Is he inviting me to look for the good and true and beautiful? Is he inviting me to go to that person and say something? Um, and then we conclude with perhaps a prayer or the doxology or whatever it might, saying the Lord's Prayer, a way to kind of tie it up. And again, this is not a you have to. It's learning how to go with the flow of the Spirit as you're opening up your soul to God, and letting him together with you examine your soul.
Do you think if somebody starts this, it'd be helpful to maybe take a smaller bite? Say, I just want to examine my morning and
Hmm.
see if I can pick something out of my morning, or is it better just to go take the whole thing in?
No, I think it's like with prayer. I don't encourage people to start an hour in prayer because you're going to fail. But I think if it's as simple as just going with the morning, God's always wooing us in love. And so I think even starting in those small segments, the person's going to find grace upon grace upon grace. And it's going to expand their capacity to be able to say, I want more of that. I'm so surprised by joy of what God's doing in me and through me and in my world. I want more. And I want to spend more time in that.
Oh yeah, I mean, for those of us who have commutes, I mean, we could probably just take our attitude and words and thoughts as we drive. Uh, and I've had to do that. I've had to really coach myself about the idea that semi drivers are not out to get me. They're actually performing a wonderful service that benefits me. you know, and they're trying to be safe, and they're not. It takes a while to speed up. Calm down, Brian. I've had to actually do some of that to create a more gracious attitude when I'm driving.
But see, I think that the key is that you're aware of it, and I think that when we stop, and I've said to people, and this is true for my own life, when I've gone too long and not had a sense of any type of confession, I'm in a dangerous spot. So I think Chuck Swindoll said it. We're always 2 seconds away from sin. Like you're talking about sinful thoughts towards a truck driver, or judgment or, whatever it might be. We're always 2 seconds away. And so that's where the discipline and the beauty of confession comes in, is it keeps my soul active and alive with the redemptive work of Christ.
It's beautiful. Any final thoughts for us as we continue with wrapping up examination of conscience and daily examine?
I would say to people that are trying it for the first time, be surprised by joy. That God will meet you and exceed your expectations in terms of how he's going to show you about yourself and who he is.
The Stages of the Soul podcast has been a production of the Caritas Center for Christian Formation in partnership with Stained Glass Media. Don't forget to subscribe to, rate, and review this podcast to help us spread the word. Nancy Kane is a licensed professional clinical counselor, retired professor, author, and speaker. Brian Dolan is a radio host, podcaster, and former public school teacher. Be sure to check out the Caritas Center's Spiritual Formation Program, as well as more information about this podcast at thecaritascenter.com. That's thecaritascenter.com. And last, but certainly not least, special thanks to the man, the myth, and the legend, Ray Kane, for his guidance, support, and expertise. Talk to you next time.
This is a Stained Glass Media production.